Oh, Nelson Mandela, if I don't forgive those who put me in prison, I'm still in prison. See? But when you can forgive, you walk away, you're free. And so the peace comes when you can let go.
I had an interesting journey through forgiveness where I thought it was, well, I forgive you because what you did was wrong to me. But that in and of itself denotes that something was wrong and I'm better or I'm right. And what I'm learning as I keep kind of being on my journey and going through this whole work in progress called life is right and wrong is just a construct. It's based on my upbringing. Well, I believe it's right because of my agreement based on my parents, based on their parents, based on their parents. And for you, it'd be the same thing. You've got your sense of right and wrong. And I was raped at the age of 20 at gunpoint and had a very traumatic experience around that. And forgiveness started as, let me forgive this person for what they did. They didn't know what they were doing. And that forgiveness journey took me down the road to realize compassion. When I actually thought about what that human being might have been going through or have been through as a child to commit an act like that to another human being, my heart burst, like it just, I cried for him. I did my own catharsis where I cried for myself prior, but I cried for him. I was so sad at the pain that he must have experienced as a young boy or as a teenager or as a young man that he could do that to somebody else. So forgiveness for me is now a process of understanding our own humanity and knowing that, you know, any of us, we're not far away from committing heinous acts. You know, we've all had those moments where we're so flustered or so angry or so passionate about something that something could happen. And to recognize the humanity in it and to have compassion and empathy for what somebody else might have been through themselves, for me, is what the forgiveness process is about.
Forgiveness has nothing to do with changing the other person. I think this is where most people get caught on. They think, if I forgive, that person's going to attack me again. And they believe we're going to predict that. Forgiveness works if you see no more value in hurting another person or making them suffer. If you believe that in my own defenselessness, my safety lies. And the world's law says, you know, if someone's attacking you, attack them back. So we don't believe that person is attacking us. We believe the person is fearful. And they're even giving a call of help for love. And if it doesn't look like love, then we say, well, then they're giving a call of help for love. And so we can give more love to that person. We refuse to see the other person as hurting us, because that's only an ego view.
That's traditional forgiveness, to seeing them as better than we thought they were, or bringing compassion to a situation and seeing them differently and recognizing that we saw them falsely. Yes, that's psychological perception. But what we're talking about is to be able to perceive a different reality altogether, to see the perfection of everything the way it is, as it is. That's the shift. I found out when I started to research it that people who experience cancer, many of them have a tendency to have a problem with forgiveness. Their modus operandi in dealing with their emotions is to suppress them and repress them, deny them intensely. And so it goes deep into the psyche and deep into the body, and then they pretend that it's okay, that, you know, they don't feel anything. They numb out, or they get addicted to something in order to stay numbed out and medicate it.
Forgiveness is releasing so much of this stuff in our minds that it's just simply inaccurate. But we've never questioned it. If you don't question it, then you'll never find out that it's inaccurate. So forgiveness is realizing I'm holding on to grievances. I'm holding on to making someone else responsible for my upset or my pain or my lack or whatever else. It's a very immature perspective to have. And forgiveness is really releasing these thoughts and ideas and accusations in my own mind out of enlightened self-interest, because as long as I hang on to them, I will perpetuate the idea that I'm small and lacking and unworthy and a victim. It's just a pointless closed loop to stay in when I have the option of breaking out, so to speak, and ultimately finding myself in a much better closed loop where I'm fine, everybody else is fine, everybody's deserving, everybody makes mistakes, but everybody's inherently lovable, etc.
The first step is you got to stop yourself. It's like Jim Carrey in the movie there. Somebody stop me. You got to stop yourself from thinking with the ego. Now the ego wants this whole thing to be real because there's something that most people don't know about the ego. The ego likes this idea of separation. The ego wants to keep it going. It's a game that the ego wants to maintain because, for one thing, it feels special. It feels important to have an individual identity and a personal existence and all these special relationships and goals and dreams and desires and accomplishments and possessions. That all feels really cool to the ego, and the ego wants to keep it going. But all it does is it keeps you stuck here, and you live what seems to be a lifetime, which is really a dream. These are kind of like serial dreams that we have over and over again. So you have this in-between time. And actually all your time is spent in dreaming. The whole thing is a dream until you wake up. And when you wake up, that's enlightenment, and you're no longer asleep, you're no longer in the dream. You may appear to be here for a while, but you realize that's all it is false appearance and illusion. And what you're doing is you're going home. And that's a whole different discussion. But when it comes to the forgiveness that gets you to that point of enlightenment, the first step is you've got to stop reacting with the ego. And if you can do that, and you can get very good at doing that, all it takes is practice. If you want to be good at forgiveness, you practice every day. You want to be a good piano player, you practice every day. Well, spirituality is no different. And if you can practice every day, you can get into the habit of thinking with the right part of your mind instead of the wrong part of your mind, and you can stop yourself. So when that guy cuts you off in traffic, or that politician comes on the TV screen you can't stand, and you want to go, instead of doing that, you go to do that and you stop yourself. That's the first step. And if you can do that, then you can take the second step. And the second step is you switch, from looking at the world and looking at that politician or the guy that just cut you off, looking at it with the right part of your mind instead of the wrong part of your mind. And the right part of the mind will say, look, if you forgive, you'll see this differently, you'll feel better, you'll be happier, you can take stress out of your life. I've been doing this particular kind of forgiveness for 23 years, and I don't feel one day older today than I did 23 years ago when I first started doing this. I'm 65 years old, I don't feel it. I don't feel like anything's changed. And it's really stress that gets people. It leads to all kinds of illnesses and problems and bad thought processes that even lead some people, God forbid, to suicide. That can all be undone through a discipline. And that second step is switching to that right part of the mind, and the right part of the mind has a totally different story about what's going on in the world. And instead of being a victim, you can be at cause. And there's no power in being a victim. There's no power in being at the effect of the world. But there's plenty of power if it's coming from you instead of at you. So the second step is you switch to the right part of your mind. And the third step is knowing that because there's only one of us, your mind is going to interpret whatever you think to be about you. You're going to change what you think about the world and about those people. The wrong part of your mind thinks in terms of separation and division. The ego loves conflict. The ego loves judgment. Why? How can you keep the game going without judgment? And what causes judgment? Well, you got to make it real in order for judgment to prevail. But if you switch to the right part of your mind and you're forgiving, and you're becoming more calm. Then you can take a step, which is the third step, and I think it takes a while to get into the habit of doing it. You want to think of that person as not the false image that you're seeing. Yeah, you're still going to live a normal life if you're smart. I hope that you don't become so spiritual that you can't carry on a normal conversation with people, because I meet spiritual people all the time, and I swear sometimes they don't know how to carry on a normal conversation and have a normal life and be happy, which is why I tell people, look, don't forget how to be normal. You know, it's okay to have your life. You don't have to give up anything. This is not a sacrificial form of spirituality. It's not talking about giving up anything in your life. It's just talking about looking at it differently. It's like A Course in Miracles would say, now you're above the battleground. You know, now you're looking at it from a place where you're not stuck in it and you're not at the effect of it. And instead, you can think of people as, well, you know, okay, they think that they're individuals, bodies, separate, and that all this is real. But you know what? I know better. And I know that this is just a projection. You know, just like the Hindus said thousands of years ago in the Vedanta, this is not real at all. And I'm going to think of them not as being that separate individual that they think they are. I'm going to look at them and think about them as being what they really are, which is the wholeness of oneness, perfect oneness, the source, you know, where you came from. You are exactly the same as your source. This is something that is immortal. It's invulnerable. It's something that can't be threatened by anything in this world. It's something that can't even be touched by anything in this world. It's possible to get in touch with that and live like that instead of this temporary thing that by definition is going to be dead eventually anyway. That's not real. You know, whatever is temporary and transitory is not real. But what is real is permanent. You know, something that will never fade away, never die. You know, God never dies, Spirit never dies, and neither do you, because you're exactly the same as your source. And that's what's possible for you to get in touch with and live that way. You can go through life fearlessly in the attitude that there's nothing here that can hurt me, not really. Because what I am is nothing less than God. And I know that that'll sound arrogant to some people. I might as well say I am God, to say that I'm the same as God. But that's not really arrogance. What is arrogance is to think that you can be separate from your source and to think that you can be separate from God. That is the arrogance of the ego that believes in separation and wants to keep it going.
It's when you are in a more reflective frame of mind, more analytical frame of mind, where you look at what happened and you begin to ask yourself some questions. What made the person do that? How can I understand what happened if I put myself in their shoes? Okay. Were they wounded? Were they just acting out something on me and I just happened to be the person that they wanted to use to act out their wound? Could that have been in it? Was I taking it too personally? Maybe it wasn't even about me. It was about them, really. So we're looking at it much more reflectively and also bringing what I would call the best of human qualities to the situation: compassion, mercy, understanding, tolerance. The pain should be acknowledged and felt, but the other stuff is optional. That's suffering. Pain is pain. All the interpretations and other stuff is suffering, and that's optional.
We have what we call a forgiveness letter. So we take the most traumatic experience that the individual's ever gone through, and we ask them to write a letter of forgiveness. Forgiving the person for whatever it is, something as horrible as might have killed my mom, or some of the girls have been raped, or we have one guy who was shot in the head about 4 or 5 times. They pronounced him dead twice and he's still alive. We ask him to forgive. And forgiveness is major. It's a major part. It's sort of like what I want to say is the highlight. But in that forgiveness letter, which is much more important, is an apology. So the first paragraph is forgiveness for whatever happened. But the second paragraph is an apology. It says, I apologize for whatever my thoughts whatever my bitter reaction, whatever it was that I intended to do or wanted to do for retribution, for retaliation. There was something that I felt, and I apologize for that. I might have wanted to hurt your family. I might have wanted to kill you. I might have wanted to just pour acid on you, whatever it is, burn your house, whatever it is, we have them apologize for their thoughts. And that's really the cleansing. So the forgiveness is something that brings up deeply rooted issues that might make a person cry and relive a situation. And that's like that kryptonite. We're going to get them to talk through it. But the real healing comes when they apologize for the actions that they wanted to do in retaliation for what was done to them. So now this becomes really personal, and it's like a relief. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to kill you anymore. I don't want to hurt your family anymore. And then there's always a message. No matter what happens to me in life, there's a teachable moment. So the last paragraph is, and I thank you. I thank you for whatever message I learned. Not to walk the streets at night, not to drive that kind of car, whatever it is that might have came up, that I can say, you know what, I learned a valuable lesson to value my friends or take better care of my mom, whatever the situation is. I need to thank you for allowing that lesson to be learned. And we find that this is the way to help people heal, but also this is the way I find that most people leave my class.
We call it the reframe. It's where we look at this story and say, yes, it happened. It hurt. From a human perspective, it was not good. Shouldn't have happened, really. It's a pity that it did happen. But if we look at it from a spiritual standpoint, maybe there was a reason why it happened. Maybe we actually brought it into our experience ourselves for a reason. Now, this is at the soul level now.
I always found it a hubris to walk around bestowing forgiveness on people, saying, I will forgive you for that wrong you did me, and I will forgive you for that wrong you gave me. To me, the more I've understood myself and seen myself realistically, I think my primary business is not forgiving others, it's asking forgiveness for the unkind things I've done, for the ignorant things I've done, as well-intentioned as it may have been, for the lazy things I've done, for the times I've lied in my life, or stolen things, even stealing people's time by demanding attention. So the more we see ourselves realistically, we realize we have a lot to be forgiven for, and that may be just as useful as going around forgiving other people.
Forgiveness was really difficult for me. Forgiveness was super difficult. I had "I forgive you" written on my bathroom mirror every time in the morning when I brush my teeth. I had like real problems with guilt and forgiving myself. And now looking back on it, I think it's kind of silly because there wasn't anything I did that was really so terrible. I think that where I got really kind of sucked into it and all the self-loathing, again, is the ego. It's sort of like to say that, I don't think much of myself, but I'm all I think about. Where I decided I hated myself, it was just me thinking about me, and being self-absorbed and self-obsessed. When I can look at it at this point and really honestly recognize that it was more of an exercise in just being self-obsessed than accomplishing anything. I hadn't done anything so terrible that I should want to kill myself or anything. The purpose of the inventory work is to identify which behaviors don't serve us and to discard them and to move on in a more productive way. By taking an inventory and sort of putting myself on trial and deciding that I hated myself, that wasn't recovery. That was just self-obsession and self-loathing.
Self-forgiveness is accepting ourselves the way we are and recognizing that we've done nothing wrong. We've committed crimes, misdemeanors. In human terms, of course we have. But in spiritual terms, we did what we had to do. See, in order to play a victim game, which is the game we come in to play, we have to have perpetrators. We can't be victims without perpetrators.
I think when it comes to parents, it's important to remember our parents have done the best they could do at the time with what they had. And of course, most people, for their parenting skills, they look to their own parents. And they either try to model and emulate what their own parents did, if they think they got most of it right, or they try and do the opposite, which is, of course, often the case. So always remember that our parents were trying to do their best. And remember that they were a reflection of the struggles that they had as a child, and that often those kind of imperfections are not cleared up by the time one becomes a parent. So parents are not perfect, just like no one is perfect in that sense. And I think that as we can come to take that bigger view and really see the love that they manifested, and then come to see that there were times when they may not have been so loving, and try to open our minds to see how that could have been, and enlarge our field of view to where we're considering what they had gone through as a child, because that's what kind of shaped their abilities as a parent. And the more we can kind of expand that and see it with all of the features, positive and negative, that were involved, the more we can come to a place of forgiving our parents it's for any kind of lapses.
We're all going to die someday. Conventionally speaking, physically, the body dies. That's the great equalizer. I believe people are doing the best they can with their own wounds, blind spots, suffering. I believe my parents did the best they could raising me. And if they were kind or not, they were still doing the best they could day by day, moment to moment, given their own limitations and own blind spots. Just as we did the best we could raising our children, making mistakes inevitably, but we do the best we can. So to me, forgiveness is the recognition that we're all doing the best we can within our framework of the world and our past.
First of all, it does begin with baby steps. You know, when you sit down at the piano, you start off by playing chopsticks. You don't start off by playing Mozart. And you get better and better as you go along. And it is the same with forgiveness. You do get better and better at it as you go along. You get faster at it. You get to the point where you can do it instantly. But at first, you're going to be practicing those 3 steps that I was talking about. And as you go along, eventually those 3 steps for you are going to kind of like blend into one. You'll just know. It becomes kind of like the Zen concept of just knowing as unarticulated truth. You don't have to speak about it. You don't have to think about it. You just know it. And something happens, you forgive it, it's over in a second. But that's a very advanced state. But it comes with practice. I think the real question is, how bad do you want it? These words, I want the peace of God, and there's a teaching that says to say these words is nothing, but to mean these words is everything. How do you show that you mean it with your practice? You show how bad you want it by actually practicing and starting to change your experience of life. And the only thing that's going to do that is practice. But if you want it bad enough, and if you want the results, then you will practice. Just like if you want to be a really great piano player bad enough, then you will practice. Why? Because you want it. And so, you keep at it. I don't think that there's a quality that is more important to spiritual progress than the quality of perseverance. You got to want it, you got to stick with it, and you got to say, I don't care what the world throws at me, whatever it is, I'm going to forgive it.